It's a truism that you don't notice fantastic audio in a game because you're having such a great experience playing the game. It's so easily overlooked. I would say at least 50% of your experience in a game is audio, possibly more. We've really tried to take the player on a similar flow that they'd experience with a film or a TV show. So when you go from the more kind of mundane areas of a game, like the menus, it's all scored. You know, that loading moment is all scored. So when you start the game, you've had this lovely dun 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 dun, and then it gets into the game and it kind of just plays out with a gentle like strum on the strings of a guitar.
In game development, sound is part of this grander whole, and we've got so many really creative people working on this project. So sound is helping support all those people in what they do, and at the same time it's supporting people that play this game.
I think the intention of the audio in Planet Coaster is really to complement the amazing work that the artists, the animators did and bring it to life.
So early on when we started working on the announcement trailer, I came across Compass by Lady Antebellum based on a tip from my creative director. It just completely nailed the vibe. It was warm, it was friendly, it was honest. There was an authenticity to it, and I wanted to capture that in the game. And this is what led me to coming across this chap, Jim Guthrie.
We were just tossing words back and forth, and he would say stuff like, I really want something that's organic, that feels like a live musician played it. I think there was a line where he said, made by humans for humans. But I think I was just walking home one day and I thought, he's talking about Jim Guthrie. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could just get Jim Guthrie to do it?
It seemed like a really cool project, and yeah, we just jammed on some ideas and sort of I made a demo to see if they, what they would like. I sort of sat down and I started to whistle and I played some chords and I recorded it. I sent them about like a 30-second song and they loved it and asked me to try and make it into 3 minutes.
The first time I heard it, it was just an early version. It wasn't what you hear at the moment. It's just that theme tune. Just basically that 20-second bar, and I was like, this is going to be a really great sounding game.
When Janesta Boudreau talked about Jim Guthrie and said, I know this composer, he'd be great for the game, and she sent us some of the tracks, and we were like, yeah, this is it. We can hear the man behind the music. We can hear that this is a composer making their own kind of music, and it doesn't matter what style it is. That sense, that feeling is going to be in that music.
So one of the things that people often say about Planet Coaster is it's full of personality, it's full of character, and we do everything from the design of the characters to the rides to the animations. We always try and look at the charm, we look at the personality behind it, and I think Audio have done exactly the same thing. They've approached this game at a high level and said that it needs to be personable, it needs to be about the human interaction, not only what you're doing when you're building a park, but actually the audio feedback is always at a very human level and it always has a personality to it, and it's very welcoming.
In the process of creating sound for a game, we start with the sounds themselves, and then we integrate them into the game engine and we manipulate them in real time. We make them sound higher up or lower down. There's all these things that we can do. And then all these sounds together come into a mix, and it doesn't matter how good your sounds are. If the mix isn't right, if it isn't telling the right kind of story, it puts the right kind of sounds in the foreground and the wrong sounds in the background, then it's going to be noise.
Mixing in a runtime environment is always going to bring up unexpected results, and that sometimes those results are really exciting. And I think one of the keys of being a good sound designer is recognizing when one of those things is happening and being a good editor and deciding, well, actually that's somewhere I want to go. So we'll take that idea, we'll then iterate on that idea.
It's an exciting time when you start to prototype, you start realizing what's going to work, what might not work. There's a lot of failure, but when you iterate and iterate, you start to discover amazing possibilities.
So the mix is always changing on a coaster. So, you're going up, you're going down. We're always trying to reflect when you're feeling G-force, or when your speed is changing, when you're accelerating or decelerating, when you're braking. We try and reflect all those things. What that leads to is a very engaging soundtrack.
We've approached the authenticity by sending a sound recordist called Watson Wu to a theme park, and he put microphones on everything. He put them on coasters, he put them on brakes, he put them on flat rides. So we have this pristine, authentic recordings of real roller coasters, of real flat rides, and then we embellish that.
Back in the day, we needed coders to hook up our sounds in the code, trigger them. It was 90% design and 10% coder time. These days it's more like 50-50, and we work together very closely right from the beginning, right to the end of the process of whatever you're working on.
To make sure that all these layers of sounds that we have for the clunks, for the wheels, for the wind, respond really, really well to the track, we need programmers. We need programmers to tell us, this is kind of what the game is doing, this is kind of the reduced information you need as a sound designer, and then as a sound designer I can use that kind of reduced set of information to manipulate those sounds in real time. And you won't even notice it half of the time that we're doing this in the background, but without coders, games wouldn't sound half as good as they do today.
So generally it starts off with the sound designer having an idea for what they want, something to do. So they might say, I want the crowd to do this. And then we'll look into other parts of the game to see what's going on, where are people, stuff like that, and then process that data into what sounds we want to play. One of the cool things that we're doing is audio-driven animation. This is where guests in the park will react to the audio that's happening around them. So if you've got a mascot that's walking around and they're making a lot of noise, then people around them are much more likely to, turn back and look at them, because there's something for them to look at. It's not just that they're nearby, it's that there's a reason that they're looking at them.
The audio have come to the party and looked at what like a mascot is doing in a suit. And they've actually added a new dimension in terms of the acting and the performance. But equally, if they look at a suit and they say, well, actually, that's a guy inside a suit, it'll sound a lot like that. It'll be there'll be an aspect of that which makes it all the more real, because you look at it and it makes perfect sense why it's a little bit muffled.
Well, Coaster King was always going to be a bit of a maniac, so we had to cast a bit of a maniac. Lewis's name came up. I saw some of his work and I just thought, yeah, this guy's fantastic. I have to say, I've not laughed quite as much during a directing session. It was just so funny listening to him just go off and do his thing.
We early on in the project wanted to have, it's always useful if you're doing emotes for people going over the tops of a great big hill on a coaster, for them to scream and say something, and normally it's kind of garbage nonsense, and some people might say something which sounds a bit like a swear word accidentally. So we had to define a language which gives a consistency to the world.
The reason why Planco came about was we needed people to express themselves in a way that was understandable, and we just liked the idea of creating our own language. So James Stant, another one of our sound designers, he came up with the concept of Planco.
Planco is the language that is spoken by the guests, the staff, and the mascots in Planet Coaster. When I create a new word for the Planco language, it's normally one of three approaches that I take. The first is word association. The second is onomatopoeia, so sounds like, so if I've got to think of shot or something, I think pichu. So pichu is my word for shot. It's just, what does it sound like? Okay, let's put that in word form. Third is representing a similarity to an existing language.
The crowds tell you what's right about your park. So we toyed for a long time with doing languages on them, but then we thought, well, that would make them English. That would kind of take away this unique look. And then we toyed with the idea of just having no voices at all, but that would make it so hard to create a certain realism. People talking to each other, people expressing that they enjoy themselves.
The reason I love Planco is because it just adds more depth to the world, and I start to believe in the planet that is Planet Coaster. I can imagine what they do when they leave the park because they have their own language. Yeah, I think it's great. It's like Tolkien writing for elves that don't exist. It's fantastic.
It's just really playful. There's a lovely symbiosis with the style of the game as well, and I just felt that it was just a really strong thing to include and have as part of the game.
We've made a really deep and really exciting simulation, but we also know that people need to like it. They need to love the personality of Planet Coaster, and that has to come from the visuals, it has to come from the audio, and it really has happened. I think it's continuing to go down this path of being a deeply detailed simulation with a personality, with a life, and I love that aspect of this game.